Okay, folks, so the next thing that we're going to do is double check that we got something that seemed useful out of our reading and writing over here. And so the simple way to do that is I'm just going to go check on my CSV file. So here's my converted JSON.csv. It does seem like things got written to it, which is good. Usually what we are looking for. Now you will notice, I'm sure, that there are no row headers here, right? I actually haven't written the names of the fields at the same time that I have put them into this file. So, of course, how might I deal with this? One thing I could do is I could loop through, I'm not going to bother to save this because obviously it's already there. I could do something like I could loop through the attributes, right? In Station, I could do that once ahead of time, right, before I started going through every single one in the list and just write it to the output file. So I'm not going to worry about that just yet because what I want to do is I want to look at how I might deal with multiple files. So to do that, if you're going to be dealing with multiple data files, and these, again, remember, could be CSV or JSON files, it doesn't matter, and we'll see exactly how and why it doesn't matter. Chances are you're not going to want to have them kind of here cluttering up your folder that has your actual Python scripts in it. You're going to want to put them into a folder altogether. So I'm going to call this JSON data or JSON downloads. Let's call it that. Okay, I'm going to put my city bike data JSON in there, and now I'm also going to put in just another copy of this, right? So a few minutes has passed. That means that the data values will have changed here. So again, imagining that you were doing an analysis over time, you might want to be able to load multiple copies of this data. So I'm going to go right back to, I'm going to just return in my browser to this. You'll see that if I reload this page, right? There's been an update in the execution time. The data has changed. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Same process as before, create a new text edit file. Nothing new to see here. So I'm going to say new, paste, make sure I'm in plain text, save it. And I'm just going to call this city bike data one.json. Once again, it's going to ask me about saving it. Say use JSON, all is well. Okay, so the question is, how can I get Python to, rather than requiring that I say open this specific file, that it will actually just go through all of the files? Oops, oh, that's not what I wanted to show. I'm in the wrong place. There we are. So how can I make sure that it goes through all of the files? So I'm going to comment out my print file, my print statement here, right? So we're going back kind of all the way back up here. Now, the one thing that I'm going to stipulate is that I only want to write to one file, but I want to read in from multiple files, right? So I'm only going to create my output file reader and writer once. But now there's a question of everything below this, right? I need to somehow make more generic, right? So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use another recipe book. And this one is kind of funny. It's called Glob. I think it might stand for global. I'm not sure. I think it's funny that it's called Glob, so I sort of prefer not to look into it too deeply. What it can do is Glob can actually look at a folder and it will treat all of the files in the folder. It will basically create something. It will create a list of all the files in a folder, right? Then, hopefully you're seeing the parallels here, I can just use my for in loop to say, okay, loop through all of those files. So the way that I access Glob is going to be pretty simple here. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called folder name, okay? Because remember, I just moved all of my data into a folder because I don't want it cluttering up the place where all of my scripts are, right? So I have a folder called JSON downloads. So I'm going to say, hey, by the way, the folder's name is JSON downloads, right? This is just to kind of keep it out of the way. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, for file name in, this is where I use glob. So glob is the name of, yeah, it's glob global maybe. Glob is the name of the recipe book, and then the name of the recipe, specific name of the recipe is iglob. Okay to laugh. And then what I do is I say, okay, so I'm gonna give it the name to look, I'm gonna give it the folder to look at, and then I'm also going to give it some general parameters of the type of files that it should be looking for. So it's going to be folder name, right, which is a variable. But then on top of that, I'm going to say, look, you're going to go to the JSON downloads folder. / means go into it, right? You're familiar with that from looking at your computer and also probably moving around with the command line at this point. And now what I can do is I can use asterisk. Asterisk is a wildcard, okay? So it's kind of the equivalent, it's actually more than the equivalent of the dot in our regular expressions. Wildcard is like a combination of dot and wildcard, dot and asterisk, right? So basically it's saying any collection of characters that ends in .json. So essentially you would interpret this as go to this folder and then look for any file name that ends in .json, okay? And that's because I might have other stuff in this folder, right? I mean, we could be very clean and tidy about it and make sure nothing else gets in there. But we want to be specific and just say, by the way, if there's something that isn't a JSON file, I don't want you to try to deal with it. And now, again, we have a for loop, right? So all of the code that we have will still work, right? We just need to make sure that it's clear that it belongs to this for loop, right? And so the way that I'm going to do that is just, I actually should see if there's a way to shortcut tabbing. I'm going to go look for a shortcut for tabbing a whole chunk of code, and I'll be right back. Okay, well that was quick. So it turns out that if I want to get all of this under my for loop, right? So I need to have all of this indented. If I actually just highlight all of it and hit the tab button, it just bumps it all in one tab, right? If I wanted to untab things, if I hold down the shift key and hit tab, it moves them back. So that's a nice little shortcut. So now I need to make obviously a few minor adjustments here, but they really are quite minor because now instead of saying I'm specifying this particular one, we know that file name is the variable that we're looking at, right? So I can just say open file name, right? And then apply the rest of my code. So hopefully if this is written correctly, right, I'm already writing it to a new file. If this is working correctly, this is actually just now going to apply the code that I wrote for one file to all of the files that are in the folder JSON downloads, which at this point is only 2 files, right? I just made a couple of copies. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. This one, right? I just have, citybike data, .json, citybike data 1.json. Notice that it doesn't matter, or it shouldn't matter, what the actual name of the file is. That's what that asterisk gets me. So even if they weren't named in a regular way, like I saved one of them with a different file name and the rest of them came from whatever they had been named, at the website or something like that, not a problem here. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so didn't get any errors, return to the command prompt, no news is good news, time to go look at my file. So now I'm going to come back here, I'm looking at converted json.csv, I open this up. Now again, this would actually it would of course be easier to scan if I was looking at it in Open Refine. But the thing that I'm going to look at to test, right, is to see the start time, right? So I have the start time will change every time the file changes, obviously. So I know that I had the 202.44 before, so let's see if that value changes now. I think if we recall, they're around 600 something individual ones. So down here, yep. So it looks like I have captured both of my files. So this is really handy, right? When we're dealing with 2 files, maybe not such a big deal, doesn't seem so great, but what if we had to deal with, 10, 20, 30 files, right? The process of creating a new script every time and pointing it to specifically that file name, and of course we all know how troublesome typos can be, we're really saving a lot of time here. So I do want to go ahead and I'm actually going to, so now what I want to do is I want to just introduce you all to, in the next video, what we're going to talk about is something called shell scripts, okay? So a shell script is a kind of script that can be run from your terminal window. So the terminal window that looks Oops, just like this one, right? Sorry, we're in a terminal window right here. Okay, so a shell script is not Python. It is kind of its own thing that exists on the operating system. Running these shell scripts is going to be very straightforward on a Mac computer, on an Apple computer, not straightforward at all on a Windows machine. So for those of you who are working on Windows machines, I apologize. This is one of those things that just really works much better on Macs. If you're interested in the future with doing this kind of thing on a PC, what you probably need to look into is a dual boot, which means that you actually run Linux on part of your machine. Or more realistically, if you were using this in a work context, these shell scripts, you would actually be running them on a server, right? So you would actually like get a little server at Amazon, for example, and you would run your shell scripts there. In any case, I just want to demonstrate this as a handy way to download the same file or set of files at intervals, at timed intervals, without having to sit there and do what we've been doing, which is go to the website, reload the page, copy, paste, etc., etc. So I'll be back in just a minute, and we're going to take a look at shell scripts.